Welcome back, everyone. Today we are diving deep, deep into ancient Rome, ready to unpack the life and legacy of Emperor Nero.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Now, you sent this really interesting mix of sources,
Uh-huh.
a scholarly YouTube video, a historian, Alessandro Barbero,
Oh, yeah?
and some other experts, plus some really interesting tidbits about Nero's life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing you're as fascinated as we are by um, this emperor,
Yeah.
this figure who's so often painted as this tyrannical monster.
Right, right. The bad boy of Rome.
But is that the whole story?
Well,
That's what we're here to find out.
yeah, and I think what's really fascinating here is that so many of the stories we hear about Nerone, the matricide, the whole fiddling while Rome burned,
Right.
these stories come mainly from his political enemies.
Oh, okay.
We're talking Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio,
Uh-huh.
not exactly singing his praises.
Not exactly fan.
No, no. And you add in some early Christian writers who had their own reasons for portraying Nerone as a villain,
Right.
and you start to see how this monster narrative took hold.
Okay, so we need to be approaching these accounts with, like, a healthy dose of skepticism, right?
I think so, yeah, definitely.
So what does a closer look at the historical evidence actually tell us?
Well, for one thing, modern historians pretty much agree now that Nerone probably didn't start the Great Fire of Rome.
Okay.
In fact, he wasn't even in the city when it broke out.
Oh, wow.
And when he did return, the evidence actually suggests that he got really involved in organizing relief efforts.
Oh, wow.
And, he took steps to rebuild the city.
So not exactly fiddling away while it all burns.
No, no.
Okay, but what about all the rumors of people he supposedly killed? That has to factor into his reputation, right?
Yeah, of course, that's a big part of the pressure. But even here, I think a deeper look reveals some nuance.
Okay.
The traditional story paints him as this bloodthirsty despot with just a huge body count. But historians really only consider the deaths of his mother, Agrippina, and wife, Artavia, as solid. Like, those are the only confirmed ones.
Okay, so still not great,
Right.
but not exactly a murderous rampage either.
Exactly. And it's important to remember the context. This was ancient Rome.
Right.
We're talking brutal power struggles, and even Agrippina and Octavia, Nerone's alleged victims, were powerful figures themselves, caught up in this deadly game.
That's true. I mean, it makes you wonder if anyone in that system could truly keep their hands clean.
That's a great point. It's something that historians really struggle with, and I think, judging historical figures by today's standards, while tempting,
Yeah.
we have to understand the realities of their time.
Right.
It was a very different world.
Yeah. Okay, so we're starting to see that maybe this Nerone as a monster narrative
Yeah?
might be a little simplistic.
Right, exactly.
But before we go crowning him some kind of misunderstood hero,
Yeah.
let's talk about his policies. I mean, he was a reformer, right? Which isn't exactly the image that most people have.
That's right. Yeah, he implemented some pretty significant policies aimed at, kind of shifting Roman culture. So, for instance, he was really interested in moving the focus away from militarism
Oh, interesting.
and towards a more Hellenistic approach.
Okay, sure.
More Greek influence, more focused on the arts.
Okay.
He really seemed to envision Rome as this kind of less warlike, more culturally vibrant.
So Nerone, the art-loving peacenik?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
And he also enacted tax reforms that would have benefited the lower classes.
Okay.
But of course, these moves put him directly at odds with the Roman Senate,
Right.
which of course, represented the interests of the wealthy elite.
Right. That clash between the populist leader and the established elite?
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
It does, doesn't it? It's a story as old as time, probably. And what's really interesting, I think, is that some of Nerone's reforms actually had a lasting positive impact.
Oh.
Yeah, especially his currency devaluation.
Okay.
Some historians even argue that actually helped stimulate trade and alleviate some of the economic pressures that were building within the empire.
So even though he was like clashing with the Senate, in a way he was looking out for the everyday Roman citizen.
Yeah.
That seems pretty significant.
It does add another layer of complexity to his story, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about the darker accusations and these surprising reforms.
Uh-huh.
But what about his reputation for extravagance? I mean, didn't he build himself a pretty lavish palace after the fire?
Ah, yes. The Immimus Domisoria, the Golden House.
Right.
For centuries, it's been held up as like, the epitome of Nerone's decadence and self-indulgence.
I have a feeling you're about to tell me there's more to the story.
Of course.
What was the true purpose of this Domisoria, beyond just being a lavish palace?
Well, recent research suggests that it wasn't just a personal pleasure palace for Nerone. There's evidence that it also housed government offices.
Okay.
So that points to a more centralized power structure.
Hmm.
And some historians even believe that it was, to some extent, open to the public, which could have been Nero's way of, further strengthening his connection with the Roman people.
So instead of a symbol of personal indulgence, it might have actually been a tool for consolidating power
Right.
and connecting with the Roman populace.
It certainly complicates the traditional narrative, doesn't it?
It does. And speaking of complexity,
Yes.
you can't talk about the Domisoria without mentioning its remarkable architectural features.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for example, there's evidence of a rotating dining room
What?
with constellations painted on the ceiling.
Hold on. A rotating dining room?
Yes. This might be the octagonal hall that's been uncovered in modern excavations of the palace.
Wow, a rotating dining room under a painted sky. That's pretty impressive, even for a Roman emperor.
It's quite something.
Yeah.
It really gives us a glimpse into the grandeur and ingenuity of Roman architecture. And if you ever have the chance to visit the ruins of the Domisoria today, you can still get a sense of that magnificence.
Okay, so we've got Neron the builder, Neron the reformer.
Hmm.
Are we sensing a theme here? Was he perhaps trying to revolutionize Roman society?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, his pro-Greek stance, for example, was definitely revolutionary, even shocking to the traditionally anti-Greek Roman elite.
Right. I mean, this is a society that had conquered Greece centuries earlier.
Exactly. So the shift in attitude was really significant.
And of course, we can't forget about Neron's participation in the Olympics.
Ah, yes, his triumphant appearances at the games.
Though some might say his victories were a tad suspiciously consistent.
Perhaps a bit of, shall we say, imperial influence at play.
Yeah. But seriously, it makes you wonder, was he a true visionary trying to reshape Roman society? Or was he just a power-hungry ruler using populism for his own gain? What do you think?
That's a tough one. I think it's a question that, continues to fascinate historians, and rightfully so. I think what's so intriguing about Neron is that he just defies easy categorization.
Right.
He was clearly an ambitious and at times ruthless ruler. But he also demonstrated, moments of genuine vision and a desire to connect with the people.
It really challenges this idea that historical figures neatly fit into these categories of good or bad.
Exactly. History is rarely so black and white.
Right.
And to really understand Neron's story fully, we have to look at how his reign ended and what happened after his death.
Okay, so after all this intrigue and upheaval, what ultimately became of Nero?
Well, after his death in 68 AD, the Roman Senate, who had been at odds with him for much of his reign, really sought to erase his memory from history.
Oh, wow.
They used this practice called the Natio Memoriae, which literally translates to condemnation of memory.
So basically trying to wipe him in the historical record.
Yeah, as if he'd never existed.
Wow.
Destroyed statues, remove inscriptions bearing his name, essentially rewrite history without him.
That's a pretty extreme reaction. So did they succeed? I mean, did they actually manage to completely erase Neron from history?
Not entirely.
Okay.
While some statues were toppled and his name was removed from certain inscriptions, his official acts weren't revoked. And interestingly enough, he actually received a proper burial.
That's surprising given the Senate's efforts to discredit him.
It is. And what's even more curious is that, his legacy persisted in a rather peculiar way.
Okay, you've got to tell me more. What happened?
Well, imagine this. Years after Neron's death, individual claiming to be him, imposters essentially, started popping up.
Wait, people were pretending to be Neron? Why would they do that?
It's a question that continues to puzzle historians. Some theories suggest that maybe there was some lingering fondness for Neron, among the common people, perhaps because of his populist policies,
Okay.
or the cultural shifts that he initiated.
So it seems like the Senate's attempt to like demonize him didn't entirely stick with the Roman populace.
That's one interpretation, yeah. And I think it really reinforces this idea that history is always open to multiple perspectives and interpretations.
Right.
Who writes history and whose voices are amplified plays a huge role in shaping the narrative.
It really makes you question those kind of simplified versions of history that we often encounter.
Absolutely. And Neron's story in particular, I think, highlights the importance of critical thinking and looking beyond the surface. It's easy to just accept those sensationalized accounts, the good guy versus bad guy narratives.
Yeah.
But But when we dig a little deeper, we examine the sources and consider those different perspectives, we often discover a much more nuanced and fascinating truth.
And in Neron's case, that truth is certainly far more intriguing than the one-dimensional tyrant we so often hear about.
Indeed. Nero's story really forces us to grapple with the complexities of power, ambition, and historical bias. It reminds us that even the most vilified figures can have surprising layers of motivation, and that history is rarely a simple tale of heroes and villains.
So after this deep dive into Neron's life and legacy, what do you think? Tyrant or misunderstood innovator? Where do you fall on the spectrum? It's a tough one. It seems like he was like a bit of both. A ruler capable of great cruelty, but also someone who enacted policies that, at least in some ways, benefited the common people. It makes you wonder, what might have been if he had a different approach, maybe been a bit more politically savvy.
Yeah, it's a tantalizing thought experiment, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, if Neron had been more adept at, kind of navigating those treacherous waters of Roman politics, more willing to compromise or build alliances, could he have, achieved even more lasting change? Could he have really transformed Roman society?
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing that really struck me was his fascination with Greek culture.
Yeah,
If his reforms had been more successful, could Rome have become more like Greece? Like a blending of Roman power with that Greek artistic and philosophical influence?
right.
What might a Greco-Roman empire have meant for the course of history?
Now that is a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
It really underscores how even those seemingly small choices or ambitions of individuals can have these ripple effects throughout history. And Neron, for all his flaws, was certainly not lacking the ambition.
Definitely not. So after this deep dive, I have to ask, what are your parting thoughts for our listener? What should they take away from this exploration of Neron's life and legacy?
I think the most important takeaway is to never settle for a simplistic understanding of history.
Yeah.
Neron's story really reminds us that the past is full of complexity,
Mm-hmm.
and that even figures who have been, demonized for centuries can surprise us when we take the time to truly understand them.
That's a great point. And if you want to delve even deeper into Neron's world, historian Edward Champlin's biography offers a really balanced and insightful look at this controversial emperor.
Oh yeah, it's a great book.
It might provide even more pieces to this fascinating puzzle. Well, this has been an incredible journey back in time. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Emperor Neron. And remember, as you continue exploring history, keep questioning those established narratives. You never know what hidden complexities you might uncover. A pay a oishu.